So this video aims to cover the 8 best PvP characters in the entire game at the time of writing, how to build them, what teams they go in, and of course, if you don't own them, how to counter them. Please note that the data is researched by myself and other top players of every single game mode, as well as collected from stat sites like e7.gg or rtastats.com. If you click on most competitive high rank tier list right now, these are the 8 characters that are most likely to be in the S tier, what all players consider must-have. So with that in mind, guys, let's fly. I'm gonna start out with characters I highly recommend because either they're super easy to play or you can get them pretty quickly, or both. And at the time of writing, Lady of the Scales Mercedes just came out. She's the newest addition to the cast, and her unique ability allows her to sacrifice your front ally, turning them into your team's tank, absorbing 70% of incoming damage of all types. When this ally is about to die for the first time, they will instead receive 1 immortality buff, which will keep them alive until their next turn. On top of that, she also has a variety of cleanse, buffs, debuffs, and turn manipulation tools that make her a full package of both a support and a tank, albeit at the cost of one of your other units. The reason I highly recommend her for a new player is she has excellent matchup versus OP characters like Peira or Ahmed, which are some of the most common and popular cornerstones of RTA, and her offering effect is extremely awkward for anyone to play against, which means you will also be farming the other new players that are going to be having a hard time drafting against you. And on top of being a strong contender in RTA, she'll also be terrorizing your arena and guild war defenses as well, being able to combo so well with many other popular DPS characters. So this is a character to have for sure. Build wise, she doesn't need to be very tanky or very fast, so I'd focus on building her resistance to help your team cleanse the variety of debuffs you're going to face in Epic 7. Biggest decision with her is what speed to run, since it usually comes at a cost of other stats like your tankiness or ER. Really play around with her build and see what build works best for you. If you tend to play a faster strategy, then boost your speed up so you can chain your turns together. If you tend to be the slower player, well, then make a slower build and let her passive outvalue those of those cleavers attacking into you from the first turn. If you're having a hard time against her, I recommend one of the following. Just ban her. She's so OP, players are often scrambling to pick her first. While some bad players can win with an OP unit, if they have to first pick said unit, it usually means she is not in that ban protect slot, so you can just ban her and the rest of their draft is garbage. For fast players, Veronica plus any thief that fits into your team carrying the Summer Hua artifact, Summer Photogenic, allows you to completely bypass the 70% damage transfer. Veronica is there to clear the immortality after you damage the front unit enough. The opponent usually bans one of them, so the other one is there to actually win the game for you, and it's usually a guaranteed win condition. For slower players, if you just counterpick their damage dealers and reduce the net amount of damage you take, you should be able to quite easily outlast the tempo that she can bring. Thus, in a longer match, a slower player should have no issue just playing normally against her. Everyone's heard of a jack of all trades and master of none, a term used to describe a person who is so good at everything, but they're not the best at anything. Well, unlike a jack of all trades, Lone Wolf Peira is a queen of all trades, packing with her kit which grants a total of 220% combat readiness between herself and her team, which is 100% double the increase of the next best turn manipulator. She is among the best in the game. She can also cleanse 2 debuffs per character, which is sometimes game saving depending on the matchup. And on top of that, she's also augments your team's damage by having defense break debuff, one of the best damage boosters in the entire game, dropping a character's defense by 70%, which can be soul burned to make the attack hit in an AoE, so defense break all 4 characters. As if that's not enough, her auto attack also applies additional damage scaling to her attack, which also scales to her passive attack increase. This damage sometimes lets her carry and end matches all by herself in slower team compositions, and her team manipulations carry faster compositions. Picking her early gives you the option to pick whichever playstyle you want for each matchup, which in a game mode like RTA is extremely overpowered because she always gives you the option to counterplay your opponent. The only real constraint to playing her is whether or not you have access to her 2 best artifacts, Barrius' Tooth for carrying and Sweet Miracle as a defensive cleanser slash support hybrid. Until you get those, she has a bunch of stuff she can make, but not anywhere close to the power level with her true best in slot artifacts. Because she can cleanse debuff as a natural part of her kit as long as she's alive, which she will be because her passive even gives her evasion, she can take the debuffs off of the rest of your characters. A true do-it-all character that can fit into any team and does any of her roles incredibly well. To beat ML Peira, I'd suggest one of the following. Take a Euphine or Red Politis, a big CR floodgate in the entire game, which limits her ability to manipulate turns. A Euphine in particular is a good bruiser to boot, and she can single-handedly stop any turn manipulation teams that Peira can support. Fallen Cecilia can always be a hugely winning pick versus her since most of her damage is additional ticks, and FCC's passive cuts that in half. If you don't have either one of those ML5s that can directly counter her, just counterpick her team. The most simple and effective method. Her turn manipulation and damage both aren't enough to carry a game without her team's support, so directly hard countering her entire team is often your simplest solution if you don't have some of those limited ML5 units. Boss Arunka is exactly what she sounds like, having a passive that gives a buff to her if she is front and center, making her the only target your enemy can hit, and every time you hit her, she generates 25% combat readiness. That means if all 4 of your opponent's unit takes a turn, not counting for any extra turn or dual attacks, Boss Arunka gets a free turn. Mathematically, that means not only is she giving your team 3 copies of Guiding Light, but better because she's also giving herself 2 copies of Durandal, making her passive mathematically the most broken passive in the game, that equivalent of 5 5-star artifacts. Now, if that passive alone hasn't sold you yet, her ultimate also allows her to strip all buffs, which is important because that skill and her auto attack can land defense breaks, which again magnifies damage. But if you have one of the artifacts that enables her bruiser build, which is further amplified by the fact that she can drop the defense of the enemy. With all of those in mind, you can expect that she can be built both as a tank and as a bruiser for any content. Even the most aggressive compositions can appreciate the absolute safety Boss Arunka can provide to her allies. As such, Boss Arunka is easily my most recommended character for new players, both for her power level and ease of use. There are actually 2 builds you can make for her tank and bruiser. The tank build is what I actually think is the stronger build. Whenever you see a pro player in a tournament with high level stakes and a big prize pool, generally speaking, that's what they run. But the one weakness? Well, it's kind of boring to play. Bruiser is a lot more fun to play since you get to watch your big woman bonk some idiot with a stop sign. I mean, that can't ever stop being funny. But its main issue is that it requires limited artifacts, so you can only play it effectively if you were only around at the right time. If you're having issues with her, try the following solutions. Defense penetration is a good one, as Boss Arunka scales insanely with her high defense stat. Any unit that partially or even fully ignores defense, like Genua, can make light work of her. Just make sure you dodge Empyrean Ilynav since she ignores your ignorance. Well, you guys know what they say. If you can't beat them, ignore them. High tempo AoE nukers like Landy, Sage Vivian, or even Arbiter Vildred, whom you can get for free from Moonlight Blessing, are common answers used by top 10 guilds to break through Boss Arunka defenses in Guild Wars. You can also use this little thing. A lot of characters can apply it in the game. If Boss Arunka catches it, she will not be able to generate her unique buff that protects her team. At her speed, which is usually super slow, you can completely ignore her and her team becomes easy pickings for you. Before we talk about this next one, I gotta make a disclaimer. I think Empyrean Ilynav is the laziest design in the entire game, here to fix a problem the balance team has cornered themselves in. Any bias you may sense is completely intended, as her passive is designed to shut down defense penetration, the most prominent damage type over the last 3 years. Basically, all of these characters lose anywhere from 30% to 70% of their overall damage output whenever faced against Empyrean Ilynav. Add that onto her resume of injury damage and cleanse, and take note of this, a lot of characters I recommend can cleanse debuffs. It just makes the game really easy and simple to play. She has multiple builds that allow her to see high level usage, and this is just overall a very crazy character and probably the best tank in the game right now. A huge commonality that you guys might be seeing between the best knight characters in Epic 7 is that there are usually multiple builds. For Ilynav, her damage scaling is awful, but given enough stats, you can counteract that and make it pretty decent. decent, but the more slot efficient build for RTA is just to make her your main tank. Slot efficiency in this case refers to the fact that with one single pick, not only can you mitigate damage, cleanse debuff, but also deal a little bit of chip damage against the enemy, all with the same unit. That is an incredible amount of power in the draft and also in RTA. The downside to that is if she's your Aureus holder, she will sometimes clash with other knights in the same role, since stacking Aureus is super inefficient and defeats the whole purpose of playing her, which is for her slot efficiency. So faster playstyles that don't need a lot of defense tend to actually favor the tank build, while tank down and village, the slower playstyles, tend to leave her on a bruiser build so all of their knights can be stacked together in one singular draft. Beating Empyrean also isn't very hard. It's usually who she's paired with on things like Guild War defense, and honestly a lot of times involves boss Arunka or other tanky beasts that just enjoy her penetration resistance. That's what makes beating her annoying. But one of the few choices you have is injury, which is a foolproof way to chip down and outvalue any tanky drafts, which is even better if your character has injury built in like any of these. Disrupt is also a good way to go, which is just any kind of hard CC in terms of debuffs, since Empyrean is built to do it all, which means she can rarely do them all well. Cleanse doesn't mean much if the cleanser is being stunned, for example, so you can play any amount of the hard crowd control characters, just don't get 15%ed. And lastly, you can always just use defense break. Sometimes, guys, the simplest solution is the best solution. You can just go with the classic defense break whichever character she's protecting and then just nuke them. It is still the #1 way of amplifying damage in the game. Before we go through the rest, I gotta make a couple of honorable mentions. There are a couple of units that are super close to making the list, but in terms of ubiquity, they can't really hold a candle to the ones we're talking about today, the main 8. So let's go over them quickly, and the #1 trait of what makes them so good, and you have to learn either to play them or to play against them. Setsuka is the new hero who I would say isn't outright OP, but 30% evasion for her team just sounds stupid. She'll likely be in a lot of defense teams in Arena and Guild War. Okay, update. She's actually in a lot of Arena and some Guild War defenses now, kind of creeping in here quite a bit, on par with Lady of the Scales. If you actually take a look at the top ranking for all the top Arena players this season, there are so much Setsuka and Lady of the Scales, so she is already taking over the defense scene. Competitive players just hate RNG win conditions, but if you are a new player, you should be opting for these RNG win conditions to take advantage of the uncertainty of each match and add to the chaos to throw off veteran players who might have better gear or more units. Abyssal Euphine is also one of the honorable mentions. She is the best CR control and one of the best bruisers and anchors in the game. Enough said. Spirit Eye Celine is a nuker that can revive her whole team and anchor down any aggressive drafts. Works super well in standard as well. Genesis Ross is an incoming free ML5 that can seal passives and output true damage nukes. And don't forget, he's immune to debuffs and has a free revive. Aram gives another character a turn plus fully resetting their cooldowns. That is huge potential for shenanigan, and I think in any a turn-based game, that is immediately OP. Ahmed is a fast opener that gives greater attack buff and critical hit damage buff, truly unlocking the damage potential for any nukers, but as far as these characters go, they kind of fit in a narrower playstyle. They do one thing super well, but generally speaking, can't fit onto every single team, as opposed to like, let's say, Lone Wolf Peira. If you need more info on any of these other characters we're going over, you can find guide for all of these characters in the channel, either under videos or shorts. Don't forget to use the search bar, and if you're more of a reader, make sure to head over to the Discord server where we have the catalog for every single PvP character stats. In almost every turn-based game, there are two things that are always going to be OP. Characters who get to go first, and characters who have passive skills that are always active without taking their turn. In fact, 6 of the 8 characters in this video wouldn't be here without their passives. New Moon Luna's gimmick is that she can seal those passives, and on top of that, her seal applies in a non-attack skill, guaranteeing not to miss through evasion and can be soul burned to ignore effect resistance. That is deadly. That That sure sounds OP, but part of why I don't really recommend her for new players in most scenarios is that good players can just defend against the seal and cleanse it away. That is not hard to do. Due to its long cooldown, she's quite hard to play in RTA if you lose that ultimate S3, unless you have great units to pair with her. In Arena and Guild War, there's actually a lot of things you can do to abuse defense teams that are relying on their defensive passives. And of course, you can always opt for a slower build. You don't have to go for an opener build that a lot of speed players play. A lot of times what you want to do is just go with the slower build that uses the S2 so she becomes a main damage dealer and generates souls for that one big soul burn with her S3, which disarms the entire enemy team. If you're having issues beating Luna, I would say the best practice would be to break up her combos. Fast opener Lunas usually aren't a threat if there's no immediate follow-up. So high-speed cleansers or cleansers that can generate their own turn means a lot if they can steal a key turn. Infinite Horizon and Katie stand at the top of this list among a few other choice characters. Denying her soul burn is also a pretty clear-cut way of stopping her from guaranteeing your seal passive if you tend to play with effect resistance. And a lot of these characters who do that with their passives fit naturally with playing against New Moon Luna and her compositions. Being a 7-year-old game, Epic 7 sometimes has very wonky power scaling, where characters start to do a little bit too much, and Rinax falls perfectly into this category since not only is she pilfering the stats of your character, scaling her own damage, her damage is also divided into two portions between defense penetration and additional damage, the two most prolific damage types in the game. All of that she is doing at 129 base speed, the fastest in the game. Wow. For those of you guys that aren't seasoned RTA veterans, at high ranks, the correct way a lot of players draft when racing speed units is just to measure everything at base speed, since gear difference really isn't that big once you spend over a year to 3 years rolling gear the right way. And by the way, there's a video for that in the backlogs if you guys don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, play her if you have her, but if you're super new, I wouldn't really look to build a whole playstyle around Rinax, since the reason why top players make her look OP is all the very aggressive and fast units they can combo together with her. So a little bit like New Moon Luna. You know, if you have those fast combos, wow, that is insane. But if you don't, okay, maybe she's just a solid unit. And without them, I would say she's still good and you should gear her, but I temper my expectations if you're new and you're watching E7WC and Rinax is just destroying the game every time she makes it through a draft. And speaking of gearing, her build is super simple. If you're playing her at top speed, just stack attack on speed. If you're not fast, just swap one of your attack percentage right side pieces for HP and make sure you have immunity to RNG out some turn 1 shenanigans, and she is still a very strong character. She's so good sometimes you can even trade out your speed boots for HP and watch her thrive in drafts or even defense teams where you're expecting to fight Harsetti. That's actually happening a lot in high rank guild wars right now. And the way you can beat her is pretty simple, but oftentimes it requires very specific characters. You can always outspeed her, which is doable with characters like Harsetti or Zio. Outside of them, any amount of speed imprints to juice your opener to race her would essentially make her useless. Big thing to know with Rinax is oftentimes she's rarely a player's fastest character because of how often she gets banned. RTA players don't want to lose their fastest gear, so she's surprisingly easy to race most of the time. Mitigation also works surprisingly well since her damage is split into two components. The two best tanks in the game, Fallen Cecilia and Empyrean Ilynav, can absorb a lot of her damage, which will buy a huge amount of time for your team to flush her out of stealth and pick her off. I would say even Blue Crow can absorb a good chunk of the damage and then throw it back by summoning his horse. And if all else fails, you can always just pre-ban her, either both in pre or post-ban. There's a pretty convincing reason why a lot of top 1000 players in Emperor, especially low spending or free to play, specifically ban Rinax and Boss Arunka because they have the most potential to transform a match in a way where you can no longer recognize how that match can be played. Historically, she's been the best tank in the game, bar none. After her recent buffs, her biggest trait became that she's the character to reduce additional damage, aka splash damage, via characters like Young Senya or Lone Wolf Peira. Pair that up with her S1 now to Soulburn the Provoke, ability to bounce back debuffs, and she's reclaiming her throne as one of the top tanks. Her build is really simple, just make her thick. If you have like a 70 or 80 extra gear score, you can put them into one stat like effectiveness or ER CR, just not both. There's also a 3F Bruiser build that is super high win rate for cleavers and aggro players. You can try it out, but I think for most people, she's super straightforward. Just do a tank build, and that's what you want. As far as tanks go, I don't really think she needs to be countered, so you can always just counter her team, and it's, once again, the simplest solution. The only nuance with this is that sometimes to kill her team, especially if they're very low tempo, you can try to pick off the fallen Cecilia first, which reduces a lot of stress eliminating her allies one by one if they don't have a big barrier being generated every turn and they don't have all of their damage being redirected by Aureus. If you really want to specifically counterplay her barriers, you'll need characters like DJ Basar, Ning Ning, or even Operator Cigarette. None of them are super high tier characters you should be hinging your strategy around, so try to go with the first one and just counterplay her team. And then lastly, we have Harsetti. She sets all faster characters to 90% of her speed. That's it. That's her whole thing. The reason why people hate her, even a lot of slow players opt to not play her, is due to the in-game speed RNG mechanic, which gives all character a random amount of CR between 0 to 5% at the beginning of each match. This makes all her matches extremely unpredictable since her teammates could go way slower and the opponent can just run you over in that time. Like, imagine playing a poker game and as the river card is being dealt, the dealer shuffles everyone's hand. That's Harsetti. This is one of the characters with no best build. Her best build is always the build your opponent isn't expecting. The King of European Style Defense, KHM, showed a great hand of Harsetti during European Regionals by playing multiple builds on her on the same day and just hitting his opponents with a stellar mix-up. So build whatever gear you have lying around and just aim to surprise your opponents generally. Even a fast Harsetti can be good if you bait your opponents into picking slow units for you to run them over with. Beating Harsetti is always going to be annoying, but it's not impossible. AoE reactive units is the easiest way, so you can always lock in a Ram or a Young Senya strategy, or even New Kid Aiden are all excellent matchups versus her. Cleansing her debuffs is another important step to take, since even on damage builds she likes to run Abyssal Crown just to be disruptive. Since you can't be faster than her due to her passive, you can never get a turn if your opponent finds the angle to high roll a stun lock against you. Pre-ban is also an age-old tactic that just works versus these transformative characters like Harsetti, Boss Arunka. Transformative, once again, means with or without them in the game, it's just a way too different of a game. So for playstyles that go really fast like aggro or cleave, they have to ban her in conjunction with the Zeo due to how much of their passives influence that first turn economy. If you do any of those, honestly, I'm not even sure it matters, since this matchup is more dependent on the speed RNG that you roll when you go in than what you do against her most of the time, especially in RTA. Alright, that's the video. Like, comment, and subscribe, I guess. Shoutouts once again to my guildies who helped me prep for this topic. The next video is going to be on the top 8 low cost or free to play characters every account should have. Okay, bye.